Deep in his cave, the ghost of Pierre Elliott Trudeau has nestled down for the winter, safe from the reaches of the Canuckonomicon. He had hoped that Junior's tragic gaming injury would grant him respite from the dreaded tomb. Last week, he was awoken by the elder Wandio, who stood in his son's stead. But surely now Trudeau can rest. Unfortunately for him, there is another Wandio, not born of Wandio blood, but rather one who donned the name, who chose it, paid $40, and legally changed all her documents to reflect said name.
This is the Canuckonomicon.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am here with my wife, Laura.
Hello!
Who will be filling in for me today. I'll be sitting here, listening, smiling, and nodding like a good husband as she tells me a wonderful and wacky tale.
I wouldn't say wonderful.
It's not wonderful?
No. But before we start, do you have extra dollars at the end of the month and would like to give them to us? You can go to patreon.com/Canuckonomicon or ko-fi.com/Canuckonomicon. And Ben, I would like you to know that anybody that subscribes this week, I get that money, not you.
Okay.
The fact that we share finances does not, come into this.
And just so you guys know, that is ko-fi.com/Canuckonomicon.
Thank you. All right. So, I'm going to acknowledge my two main sources. The Smoke of Satan by Michael Caneo, and a really good article that was unfortunately only available in French, and as I am a filthy Anglo, I had to translate it using Google. The English translation of the title is Gregory the 17th and the Apostles of Infinite Love by Bernadette Regal-Seyard. Or Sellard. I can't remember how that one works. It's been a while. Like I said, filthy Anglo. So, Ben.
Smoke of Satan.
Yes.
So we're in for a pretty
wild
ride.
Hold on to your butt.
Okay.
So Ben, do you know what an anti-pope is?
It's a pope that's not the pope.
Yes. It's a pope who is not recognized by the Vatican. They have occurred throughout history. At one point there was 3 popes at once, and we're not really sure which one was the official pope. But did you know, most of these happened in France and Italy. Did you know Canada has our own anti-pope?
We do.
Or rather, had. He's dead now.
I was going to say has.
He dead. No, he dead.
Around.
We had our own anti-pope. And today, I'm going to tell you the story of our very own anti-pope.
Fantastic.
Jean Gaston Tremblay was born September 8th, 1928 in Rimouski, Quebec. Rimouski is now at least a small city in southeastern Quebec. I don't know how big it was 100 years ago. It's about 300 kilometers from Quebec City. It's really close to New Brunswick and Maine. It's in that kind of coastal area. Mm-hmm. They were working class. Tremblay's father was a lumberjack, which I found very funny. His last name is Tremblay. His dad is a lumberjack. You can't make it up. His family was also, as many French people were at the time, very, very Catholic. At the age of 8, he entered a school run by the Brothers of the Sacred Heart of Rimouski. When Tremblay was 16, his father died, and apparently his mother did not handle the loss well, and seems to have joined a convent, leaving her 16-year-old son on his own. I'm not sure if his siblings were older or younger than him, but at bare minimum, she had a 16-year-old.
So she went off, she became a nun, presumably.
Yes, she was not handling grief well, this was also World War II era, so this is just generally a really difficult time.
Right. And so was he living at a boarding school then?
No, he was living at home, but he ended up leaving school and joined the Brothers of St. John of God in, I believe, Montreal.
Okay.
They were a hospitaler organization, worked in hospitals and care homes.
Right.
He became a novice in 1945 at the age of 17. He spent the next few years working in the Our Lady of Mercy Hospital for the chronically ill. And during this time, Tremblay began to have prophetic visions.
Oh!
Yeah. So, first thing I want to say is, when we think of prophetic visions, in the modern age, we tend to think of people who are mentally ill.
Right.
I cannot say for certain, was Tremblay mentally ill or not? I don't know. I do think a lot of visions are caused by mental illness, but I don't think that all of them are caused by mental illness. I as a Christian believe that some visions are real. Mm-hmm. I also think they are easy to fake. And I think that sometimes you have people who are raised in a really religious environment that places a lot of value on visions, and so they start to mistake thoughts and desires of their own for signs from God or visions from God. Right.
So, and in a case like this, where both his parents are gone, this might have been a way for him to just get positive attention.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And like I said, this is World War II era. He'd effectively lost both his parents. There's a good chance he was looking after men wounded in World War II.
Right.
In the hospital. Like, this wasn't like sunshine and puppy kisses in working in the hospital. This was really difficult, seeing some very, very painful and tragic things. And he's still a child. Mm-hmm. So I think there was some very real trauma that happened to him as a young man. And whether it, like you said, was to get attention, and maybe not even knowingly trying to get attention, but just, yeah, and to seem as this very devout man that listens to God.
Right.
I don't know, but the fact is, he claims he heard voices from God, and he had many prophecies from God, and this is going to be a trend throughout the story. In 1947, God appeared to Tremblay and announced his divine plans for Jean Gaston. Tremblay saw himself in a meadow surrounded by thousands of believers, and a voice said, "All those, you will win them," referencing the souls of the people in the meadow. In 1949, he was prompted by a divine voice to ask the bishop for permission to start a holy order. Because as a monk, you can't just go out and start your own monastic community. You need to get permission for that. And I didn't mention this before. Jean Gaston Tremblay changes his name throughout his life as he becomes a monk and then a priest and then an anti-pope. And just to avoid confusion, I'm just going to keep calling him Tremblay because there's too many names otherwise. Mm-hmm. So, Tremblay asked the bishop was going to ask the bishop for permission to start a holy order. He was also told by this divine voice that this order would preach the gospel like the apostles in the early church had, and that his influence would spread over all the world. He foresaw the order practicing evangelical poverty, and he saw himself speaking with a pope chosen by God. I want you to remember the chosen by God part.
Right. Because especially a guy who thinks he's getting visions from God.
Well, it's not just that. The Pope is, it's the College of Cardinals. They believe they are guided by God, but the College of Cardinals is the one who elects the Pope.
Yeah.
So, Tremblay, being the obedient 20-something-year-old that he was, I think he was 21 at this point, obeyed this voice and went to the friar. The friar disapproved of the plan, saying that the level of poverty was, quote, too great. Tremblay believed that God wanted this community to happen, so he left the Brothers of St. John of God to form his own community at the age of 24. His first follower was Brother Gilles, aged 31, who had epilepsy. Tremblay told Gilles to stop taking all his medications.
Oh.
And I'm just going to say things don't get better from here.
No?
Yeah.
They would not.
They don't. I unfortunately have no follow-up on Brother Gilles. I'm just saying in general, things don't get better from here. So, February 14th, 1953, the brothers, there was more than two of them at this point, moved to Rivière de Prairie, but didn't stay long due to poor living conditions. One of the authors I cited, Cuneo, described some of their lodgings as, quote, hovel-like.
Oh.
And I want to point out, they're living an itinerant life in rural Quebec.
So it's all just harsh wilderness.
It's cold, and yeah, it's harsh. Like, I've not been to Quebec. I've been to a lot of Canada. I've been to areas of Ontario with similar climate. That's brutal.
Yeah.
You don't want to be doing that.
It's a wet cold, too.
Yeah.
You're so close to
it's
the
not
coast.
like here.
Yeah, out here we get pretty dry and like minus 30.
But it's wet and minus 30.
So that's the kind of biting cold that goes like right through your clothes.
Yeah, and also they've taken a vow of extreme poverty, so I'm going to guess they don't have like really good warm clothes.
I can't imagine.
They wore robes, I know that. I don't know what their rules were on modern parkas. I didn't look that up. So, Tremblay did manage to get his community officially sanctioned by Pope Pius XII. He knew the founder of a local convent named Mother Rita Marie, and she pulled some strings and convinced a conservative bishop in the area, Paul-Émile Léger, to take Tremblay's case to the church hierarchy because she felt that the church needed such soldiers. Léger shows up again. You need to know, he was very conservative, and there was a movement to have him made pope at one point. He doesn't become pope of any kind.
So he's not the anti-pope either.
No, he's not the anti-pope. On May 13th, 1953, Tremblay received papal authorization to start the Brothers of Jesus and Mary. This date was later seen as significant, as it was the 117th anniversary of Montreal receiving an episcopal seat from Pope Gregory XVI. So this is, at this point, seems like a random fact.
Right.
But they believe everything is prophecy, everything is connected.
Mm-hmm.
And so later down the line, they start to kind of connect things that maybe most people wouldn't connect. After returning from a pilgrimage to the Holy Land and Rome in 1954, Tremblay visited Bishop Léger to ask him if he was on the right path. Léger said he was and confirmed and encouraged him to remain on that path. However, the brothers did not yet have a permanent home. So when Tremblay received funds from a donor that allowed the brothers to move to Saint-Hippolyte, they gratefully accepted. Unfortunately, within a year, Tremblay had acquired a reputation for, and I swear to you this is a direct translation from French, spiritual terrorism.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, have you figured out what constitutes spiritual terrorism?
I'm assuming it just with his extreme conservatism, just the extremeness of all of his beliefs, that the extreme poverty, the extreme conservatism, just the everything about his movement, living in hovels and not being part of kind of the mainstream Catholic Church.
Okay.
Also, keep in mind, these are young men, right? Like, he's in his mid-20s at this point, and most of his followers are young men as well. And let's be honest, young men, they tend to, they go hard. When they find something they believe in, they go hard.
Yeah, well, and they get hardcore into it, so, yeah, I can't imagine he was a stabilizing force in his area.
No, I don't think he was. Also, I'd like to apologize for the gross noises our dog is making.
I don't think it's picking it up. But
Hopefully
if you hear
not.
licking sounds,
It's the dog.
that's
It's not me. Anyway, Tremblay had a reputation for spiritual terrorism. This reputation harmed the entire order, just the image of the entire order. He was told he needed to leave the area within 3 days.
Oh.
So then they went to Gaspé, which is in far southeastern Quebec, actually quite close to Rimouski, like quite close by Canadian standards, like several hundred kilometers away, but, by Canadian standards.
It's a short 3 hours.
Oh, yeah, nothing. They're on the same highway, too, so it's actually pretty close. In 1958, Brother Celestin, who was one of Tremblay's followers, received a vision and told Tremblay that while he would have to suffer, at age 33, extraordinary events would occur. Now, you just perked your head up.
Yeah.
What's important about 33?
Isn't that when Christ died?
Yes.
Yeah.
33. So 3 is viewed as an important number in Christianity, and it's commonly believed that Jesus was crucified at age 33. So I don't think it's a coincidence that they believe extraordinary things will happen when he turns 33, specifically.
Yeah.
So Celestin also told Tremblay that the north is where they needed to be, because they're in southern Quebec right now. Coincidentally, at this point, gossip had forced them to leave Gaspé. I don't know if it was specifically spiritual terrorism or not, but they were not welcome. Tremblay found a farm for sale in Saint-Jovite, and he saw that as fulfilling the second half of Celestin's vision. Mm-hmm. Saint-Jovite is in the Laurentian Mountains. It is 350 kilometers away from Quebec City, or 125 kilometers away from Montreal, and it's in the Mont-Tremblant National Park.
Okay.
So it's a rural area. Saint-Jovite itself is actually kind of a resort town, like you'd see, like, say,
it's like
Whistler.
A ski lodge.
Yeah, ski lodges and stuff like that. And around there, it's very rural. However, I wouldn't say Saint-Jovite is further north than Gaspé. They're pretty much the same latitude, but it is more inland. Gaspé is right on the Atlantic. Saint-Jovite is several hours away from the Atlantic or even the St. Lawrence River. So maybe Celestin was a little off on that one. I don't know. The brothers were preparing the farm at Saint-Jovite, but the buildings were not yet habitable. So they were staying with the bishop of nearby Sherbrooke. And like several previous bishops, the bishop of Sherbrooke took issue with the brothers and then asked them to leave his diocese. So then they moved to Saint-Jovite permanently.
Canadiana cartoon goose sing. The chimera goose is coming.
So, sensing a pattern with issues with spiritual authority.
So, like, what are they teaching that is making these bishops so cranky?
They're very conservative and very traditional. They want to go back to how they view the church having been practiced 1,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago. And this is the 50s, so Vatican II has not happened yet. But there is a movement in the church to modernize, to start, just to get with the times a little bit. And these guys are not getting with the times at all.
So let's just clarify for maybe some of our more secular listeners. Vatican II is when they switched from the Latin Mass to an, I guess, English and Canada.
Vernacular
to
Mass.
a vernacular Mass.
It's one of the things. It was a huge church council. It went on for 3 years. They basically looked at different issues, modernization in the church. One of the most obvious ones that we can point to is, like you said, is the changing the language that the Mass is celebrated in.
Yeah, and you and I went to a funeral at a Vatican II church.
Yes,
And so
it was
they
in
switched
English.
from things like a wall altar to a freestanding altar, which is more commonly seen in Protestant churches. Just a generally more modern style service, including a sermon and stuff, which is not traditionally part of the Catholic service. Yeah. He's wanting to go back to like way back.
Way back, pre-Reformation, way back. Like I think like desert ascetics level,
okay.
like
Yeah.
I don't think he states outright anywhere that I found about that, but that's the impression I'm getting.
Yeah, and also, like, I'm thinking things like the medieval services, you had no pews in a medieval church. You stood the whole service. That was common even for the longer things like the Christmas Vigil and stuff like that. So, yeah, I could see that being...
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I haven't read a lot of their specific theology because unfortunately most of it's in French.
Oh, yeah, and then you're getting into technical language.
Yeah, and yeah, trying to translate. And also too, like, I had a migraine earlier this week, and so I just couldn't. My brain was already leaking out of my head, and I couldn't make it leak out of my head more.
Our beautiful, handsome pup is cleaning his face all over my
he's
furniture.
So beautiful. Good job, Fats. A+. Anyway. I lost my spot. Here we go. They transformed the farm into the home of the Order of the Mother of God. And they believed that it was the fulfillment of one of the prophecies given to the shepherds of La Salette in 1846. La Salette, in France, was the site of a Marian apparition in 1846. So Marian apparition is when the Virgin Mary appears as a vision or as a person. There's many cases, and this one was confirmed by the Vatican as, in their minds, being legitimate. What happened was a weeping Virgin Mary appeared to two young shepherds one evening and gave them a number of prophecies and warnings. The Virgin warned against working on Sundays and taking the Lord's name in vain. The punishment for those sins would be a potato famine.
Oh. Uh-oh.
And if you notice the year 1846, there was a couple of pretty bad years for potatoes in around there. So people really took a lot of these prophecies very, very seriously.
Right.
One of the shepherds, Melanie, said that Mary told her that, quote, now this is quoted from French into English, "If the face of the earth does not change, God will be avenged against the ungrateful and slaves of the demon." She was also told the Pope will be persecuted from all sides. They will shoot at him. They will want to put him to death, but no one will be able to do it. The Vicar of God will triumph again this time. The priests and the sisters and the true servants of my Son will be persecuted, and several will die for the faith of Jesus Christ. Woe to the priests and to persons consecrated to God, who by their infidelities and their bad life are crucifying anew my Son. The leaders, the guides of the people of God, have neglected prayer and penance. So this is a complaint against modernization in the church.
Right. I was going to say, I think, I'm sure the Pope and the bishops and stuff took that real well.
Yeah, it took quite a while for them to confirm that this actually happened, and it was very controversial. I didn't want to get into it because that's a whole other story, and it's in France. The other thing she said, or that Melanie said the Virgin told her, was that this time when all this would happen was not far away.
Right.
About 100 years away. So now we're going to fast forward a little bit. But we're going to stay in France.
Okay.
Michel Collin was born in Lorraine, France in 1905. He was ordained in 1913 into the Roman Catholic Church. I apologize. He was ordained in 1933, not 1913. He wasn't 7. He was a normal age, not a child.
Yeah.
In 1933, he was ordained into the Roman Catholic Church. And in 1935, he announced that he had been consecrated a bishop by Christ himself.
Okay.
This is not how things work in the Roman Catholic Church.
No.
Like, they believe that Christ has ultimate power and so forth, but they also believe in a church hierarchy that manages all these things. You don't just skip all the steps and go right to Jesus. So, Colin then founded the Order of the Mother of God, which he later changed to the Apostles of Infinite Love. He sought to obey the revelations of La Salette. He was also a fairly well-known figure in post-World War II France, and experienced stigmata, which is bleeding, unexplained bleeding. He wore a cross that would bleed on his chest.
Oh.
I have no more details on that. I could not tell you how it worked or why, whether it was real or fake, but apparently he had a cross that would bleed on his chest.
Oh, good.
That seems messy. I hope he's wearing black clericals. Be easier to clean. But
I bet he was wearing white to show it off.
you're probably right, actually. So, in 1950, Colin declared himself Pope Clement XV. Guess who ordained him Pope? Consecrated him Pope. I apologize.
Jean Tremblay.
No, wrong.
Oh.
Jesus.
Oh. Again, not how that works.
No, it's not. So we have got our first anti-pope.
There you go.
The next year, the officially recognized Pope, Pius XII, laicized Colin, which means he was stripped of his clerical status. Pius XII also excommunicated Colin and went as far as to declare Colin avitandus excommunicate, which means that the devout should shun Colin. This is a very, very rare step and is no longer practiced by the mainstream Roman Catholic Church. I'm pretty sure not even Martin Luther got declared avitandus.
I don't think he was.
Which
I think
is-
he was excommunicated and that was about it.
Like, that's impressive. Like, it did not take him long to just get full on kicked out. Colin didn't let that get him down. He assumed that after the death of Pius XII, he would be legitimized as the new pope. But when Pius XII died, and Pope John XIII was chosen as his successor, Colin just got angry and founded his own church.
Oh. Well, that's pretty par for the course.
Yeah. I'm actually impressed he named himself Pope before founding his own church rather than after, but I won't pretend to understand his mind. So, Tremblay and Colin met purely by chance in Dorval Airport in Quebec. Despite being a self-described submissive Roman Catholic previously, Tremblay immediately realized the Vatican was wrong. Tremblay recognized Colin as the Pope chosen by God.
Oh, good.
Remember when I said...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense, because Colin is claiming that he was handpicked by Jesus in his visions.
Yep.
And Jean Tremblay is all about them visions and about being handpicked.
Absolutely. So Colin told Tremblay that Tremblay would succeed him as Pope. Tremblay apparently received a vision from the Virgin Mary confirming Colin's statement, which is good, you gotta have that confirmation.
Yeah.
The men agreed to join their two organizations into the Apostles of Infinite Love. At this point, Tremblay had, I think, 6 or 7 followers, and Colin had 7 very elderly monks following him. Tremblay visited Colin in Lorraine, France, and was ordained as a priest and then immediately consecrated as a bishop by Colin at the age of
33.
Hooray!
Just 1 second.
That's okay. This is a good place.
Okay. So we've now got a random Quebecer and a French, like from France,
Frenchman.
anti-pope.
Yes. We have an anti-pope and a priest/bishop who was ordained by said anti-pope.
Okay.
It is a transatlantic French heresy.
Right.
I think I just came up with the title for this episode. At this point, it was 1962, and Tremblay, as I said previously, had 7 followers. The next year he had 30, and the year after that he had 90. So he was growing. Apparently he was charismatic. And at this point, they weren't really, like, going out trying to convert people. If people came to them, they were welcoming and open to them joining, but they weren't, like, on the street corners saying, have you heard the good news?
Right.
They were just often sans-jovite, living in a barn type thing.
Yeah, but I mean, people are superstitious, and they're hearing about this guy having visions, ordained by the true Pope or whatever.
Yep, absolutely. And like I said, this is Vatican II is 6 months to a year out from happening.
Right.
So even though it's not finished at this point, people hear what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And they might not like it.
Mm-hmm.
The Roman Catholic hierarchy in Quebec was less than pleased with Tremblay and the apostles. Bishop Limoges cautioned mainstream Roman Catholics that interacting with the apostles could result in having the sacraments withheld from them, or possibly in excommunication.
Yeah. How are those two different?
I think one, like, you can come back from not getting the sacraments. Like, they can say you can't take communion this week, but you confess and do better and you're back in. But excommunication's a little more final.
Yeah, that's a little more official process, I guess. Okay, go for it.
In 1962, the apostles began accepting female members as well as male members. And in 1963, they began accepting entire families, which is something I wasn't actually familiar with and I don't think is super common.
No.
As the community grew, local mainstream Roman Catholic authorities accused the apostles of, quote, white slavery and prostitution. And families of some converts accused Tremblay of hypnotism and spiritual despotism, which the spiritual despotism and the spiritual terrorism married so nicely together.
So this is a spiritual Saddam Hussein.
Yeah. Yeah. He had a big brown beard too, like curly beard. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's this is a Yeah,
good
regular Rasputin.
So Tremblay was against drinking, dancing, smoking, mixed gender swimming, and professional sports, both watching them and playing them, as they provoked commotion of the spirit. Children could only be educated at the monastery. Even Catholic schools were forbidden. And here's my favorite thing he forbade. Modern and or abstract crucifixes that, quote, do not speak to the soul were forbidden.
What?
I mean, if you've seen some of the sacred art from the 60s, it's weird. It's not for me.
Yeah,
but that's
I mean, all art in the 60s was kind of weird.
It's true. So that's one of my favorite lines. Unlike most radical traditional Catholics, though, he leaned fairly left politically and supported workers' rights. And weirdly, considering this is like Vatican II era, he performed the Mass in French.
Yeah.
Or even English where appropriate.
Huh.
And, hold on to your butt, Ben, he ordained women.
Oh, that's
unheard of.
Yeah.
Even the modern Roman Catholic Church does not do that.
No.
He also,
even most modern Protestant churches don't
yeah,
do that.
It's very much a minority of churches that ordain women. He also ordained married apostles within his group, which the Roman Catholic Church does not do either. If you are currently married, you cannot be ordained. In 1966, the Social Welfare Court of Quebec found the monastery to be unsuitable for children and ordered all children to be removed. The apostles refused to comply. There was a raid. 17 children were removed in the raid, but 55 others went into hiding with Tremblay. Tremblay became one of Quebec's 10 most wanted criminals. The search went on for 7 months. When the authorities threatened to shut down the monastery, Tremblay vowed, again this is translated from French into English, but imagine it in French. Tremblay vowed, "We will fight unto death if necessary. We will let ourselves be cut up into tiny pieces, but we will not hand over our children." He's extreme.
Yeah.
In December of 1967, a judicial delegation revisited the monastery and found that the conditions weren't as bad as originally thought, and so they overturned the original court order, and the children were allowed to return to their families and come out of hiding.
So it's almost like there's this radical weirdo movement, and the government just did not approve, and so they decided to take all the kids away.
Yes. This happens a lot. And the thing is, too, like, even though at this point Quebec was still a very Catholic province, the form of Catholicism the apostles were practicing was very different. They were extreme vows of poverty. They lived collectively. They practiced very strange things. They ordained ladies.
Would you say they were almost like a communist type of Catholic?
The
1960s?
They definitely had some communist leanings.
Yeah.
Like I said, he leaned more left politically. I cannot confirm that he was communist, but they did live communally.
I don't know that he was necessarily a Marxist, but because that doesn't jive with him being Catholic. Marxists don't like religion, period. Mm-hmm. But he was in that commusphere.
Yes. Yes.
You know, he's showing up at pro-workers' rights events, you know.
I don't know if he was showing up at events, but he was vocally pro-workers' rights.
He's vocally pro-workers' rights. Yeah. He's living communally. I imagine this would probably come off to the government as being pretty commie.
Yep. Back across the Atlantic, Michel Collin was kind of unhappy about this whole child abuse accusation thing. So he refused to visit Saint-Jovite. And when their pope refused to visit them, Tremblay did the reasonable thing and declared himself Pope Gregory XVII.
Oh, of course. So, Pope doesn't visit you. That means you're Pope now.
And I would like to point out that if Collin was an anti-pope, Tremblay was an anti-pope.
Yeah, because he's a pope in opposition to the other anti-pope.
Yeah.
Who is in opposition to the pope.
Yeah, it's great. The reason he chose the name Gregory is interesting. He admired Gregory XVI, who was the pope in the 1800s, who had extended an episcopal seat to Montreal, which was really symbolic. It kind of recognized the faith of the Quebecois people as being significant, and it recognized the continuance of the Catholic Church in Canada despite strong Protestant influence.
Right. Especially because at that point the English had basically taken over Canada entirely.
So it was a very symbolic thing, and so he took the name Gregory the 17th, or Grégoire if you are French. Sorry, I lost my spot.
I do that all the time.
Initially, Colin was kind of unhappy about this whole anti-Pope business, but later he publicly recognized that the keys of St. Peter, which is the symbol of the papacy, had passed to Tremblay. So remember a few years ago when Pope Benedict didn't die but just stepped down?
Step down, that's the...
Kind of what Colin did.
So, could this have anything to do with the fact that most of Colin's followers were actually Tremblay's followers?
I mean, probably, but I can't tell you that definitively.
Because, like you were saying, like, the movement was technically transatlantic, but Colin had, like, what, 3 old men?
At that point, yeah, it was 7 before, but there's probably 3 now, so
Yeah.
they're probably dead. So, I don't know how many were converting in actual France. It was very much a Quebec movement.
Yeah.
So, initially, Tremblay refused to have a coronation ceremony. But he relented. On September 30th, 1971, he was crowned Pope. Due to his extreme vow of poverty, Tremblay did not want a traditional papal tiara. Instead, he asked his followers to construct one and gave them a budget of $2.
Even in the 1960s, that was not a lot of money.
I know toonies didn't exist yet, but I really love the image of him giving them a toonie and being like, go nuts.
Go nuts.
But
$2 bill.
Yeah. Oh yeah, $2 bills still existed.
Yeah.
So 375 people watched as Tremblay was crowned Pope with a papier-mâché tiara, which props for creativity. Tremblay was seen as a martyr leader who had experienced, quote, the most incredible religious persecution ever undertaken in Quebec. Remember how his one of his followers predicted he would suffer?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're taking this. He is a martyr, right? He's not dead yet, but he's a martyr. I'm going to rewind a little bit. Remember La Salette?
Yep.
Well, Tremblay, like Colin, linked his papacy to the La Salette prophecies.
Of course.
The apostles consider themselves to be the order requested by the Most Blessed Virgin at La Salette. Tremblay believed that the Virgin Mary warned that Rome would lose faith and become the seat of the Antichrist. Tremblay saw the theological modernization that was taking place in the Roman Catholic Church as the result of the Second Vatican Council as proof that Rome had lost faith. Tremblay believed that the religious authorities would suppress information to disprove the apostles of infinite love. He believed that his church had been raised up to preserve the true Catholic faith. He compared his small church to Noah and his family, who were the only faithful survivors during the flood. Tremblay believed that the order would be the heel of the Virgin Mary that would crush the serpent, which is referencing a mistranslation in the Latin Vulgate, which states that the Virgin Mary would crush the head of the serpent rather than Jesus himself.
Right.
This is, at that point, I think it had been corrected in the Vulgate, but it was still very common kind of folk belief in the church.
Well, especially because even if it had been translated in like a newer Vulgate, people might still have the older
Exactly,
ones.
yeah. So there was a belief that the Virgin Mary would crush the serpent, who is symbolically Satan. Genesis actually says that the Son of God will.
Yeah.
So it was I believe the issue was mistranslation of pronouns, actually.
Yeah.
But I don't read Latin, and I only have a bachelor's in religious studies, so I'm talking out of my butt. They also had proof that Pope Paul VI, who was the current pope at this point, and was chosen over both Tremblay and Colin, was satanic. Do you want to know what their proof was, Ben?
What was that?
Paul VI, so the Roman numerals for 6.
Yeah.
Paul VI, 6 letters. 6th pope named Paul. Latin name for Paul is Paulus, which is 6 letters. 666. Furthermore, he was elected on the 6th day of the week, the 6th month of the year, at 6 p.m. 666.
Oh, so this is real.
He's like the double Antichrist. The anti-Antichrist.
This is some real hip, some real cutting theology here.
Oh, it gets better. Tremblay also believed Paul VI was a pawn of the Freemasons.
Of course he did.
I have no more information on that. I just had to include it because it's hilarious.
Well, I mean, the Freemasons are largely English organizations. So
that is true.
I wonder if that was part of it. There's not, like, as we'll see in the next 10 years from this point on when we get into the, I think it's the October crisis?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was the October or the November crisis, but the rise of the FLQ and anti-English organizations in Quebec at this period, there's a lot of anti-English sentiment going around. Especially a movement like this is going to be pretty anti-Anglo.
Actually, I bring this point up a little later, but I can bring it up now instead. That, the whole culture in kind of the 60s to the 90s in Quebec is very, very unique. It's really complex and something I know not a lot about. If you want to learn more, the podcast Fat, French, and Fabulous has a 3-part series on the FLQ crisis. If you've got 5 to 6 hours of time, you will learn so much, and it's absolutely fascinating. Cliff notes, Quebec has been kind of downtrodden by English Canada forever.
Yeah.
And there was a real movement to be their own independent country because they felt they would receive better treatment. So you bringing up the frustrations with Anglos is very, very real, and that does show up in a couple paragraphs. So, hang on. So, 1970, the apostles decided to start actually doing mission work, because up until this point, they'd only accepted people who wanted to join. They hadn't tried to go convince people to join.
Right.
They opened a mission in Montreal, hoping to expand their reach beyond rural Saint-Jovite. They also sent missionaries to the Caribbean. Guadeloupe was the most successful mission and apparently would draw thousands of congregants who were unhappy with Vatican II to services prior to getting shut down by the government.
Right.
I'm wondering if that might have just had to do with the sheer number of people in one area at one time being unsafe. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But to this day, there is actually still apostles in Guadeloupe. By the 80s, the apostles had opened missions in several major cities in Canada and the United States as well. So even though they did have ties to France, they don't really seem to be sending people to France. They're like, it's very much a New World movement. In the early 70s, Tremblay received a revelation that women could be ordained, and a number of nuns were ordained as priests thereafter. And I believe I mentioned married apostles could also be ordained at this point as well.
Yeah.
In 1971, Tremblay received divine instructions that the apostles were to study ancient prophecies. And here's where it gets a little wacky.
You mean it wasn't wacky already?
No, it was 100% serious.
This is 100% serious, totally normal. Absolutely nothing weird going on here involving popes.
I mean, our church rants about the Freemasons all the time, right? No.
No. Well, other than on Tuesday nights when we go out for our weekly Freemason hunt.
I'd like to say Ben does not speak for the Lutheran Church of Canada officially.
No, I speak for the Lutheran Church of Todd and Ben. My grandpa's a Freemason. It's okay.
So Tremblay and his followers interpreted many of these ancient prophecies to mean that the true pope would be French. And that all the prophecies agreed that the great pontiff of the last times would be French. And Jean Gaston Tremblay was, as his name suggests, French, as were his parents and grandparents.
You're just the most French.
His father was a lumberjack.
Is a lumberjack named Tremblay.
He was a Quebec stereotype. A few years previously, in 1969, Tremblay had received a message from God. Here, meaning Quebec, is France. The promises made to France, they are for you, my children. Here, New France, where the new church will be. The fact that Tremblay's original order was approved of on the anniversary of Montreal becoming an episcopal seat by the previous Pope Gregory was not a coincidence. Remember what I told you? It was 117 years previously. This was not a coincidence. It was also not a coincidence that his namesake was the one who did that.
Right.
Additionally, Greg's means flock in Latin, so Pope Gregory the 17th would shepherd the faithful.
Oh, good.
Sorry, I have to shift. I have fibromyalgia. I apologize. I got lost again.
That's okay.
So, remember when I said, here it gets wacky?
Yep.
Nostradamus!
Oh, no. Anytime he gets involved, things get weird.
Yes!
It's like between him and Madame
Blavatsky.
Madame Blavatsky.
Oh no! My computer just died.
That's okay. We'll pause here for a second, and we'll be right back.
Know where I need to go.
We're back.
Sorry, this is the third time a computer has crashed.
Yeah, we're just having real good luck in here today.
I am good at the podcasting.
That's okay. You're about as good as I am.
So anyway, before my computer tried to kill itself, Nostradamus. Maybe that's why my computer tried to kill itself.
That's about right. We were just saying, anytime Nostradamus or Madame Blavatsky gets involved, things get weird. This is starting to remind me a lot of Brother 12.
Yeah, actually. So, Nostradamus was studied at length and was seen as having predicted Tremblay, and this part is not relevant, but I just have to share it. Nostradamus was believed to have predicted Le Parti Québécois.
Wait, you mean the bloc?
Yeah.
No, he believes Nostradamus predicted the Bloc Party?
Yes.
What?
I know! And like I said, it's not relevant here, but I just had to share it because it's so funny.
Yeah, no, that's relevant. That's perfectly relevant. Nostradamus supposedly predicted the Bloc Party.
And for our non-Canadian listeners, that's BOLC, Bloc Québécois.
So the Bloc Québécois used to be a very separatist party. They're not anymore.
No.
They're now just basically the Quebec branch of the Conservative Party. The Conservatives never do well in Quebec.
Yeah. But they tend to actually lean more liberal than the Conservatives. But anyway, that's the story for another time. So, Nostradamus wrote, "The year that the brothers of the lily come of age, one of them will hold the great Romania. The mountains to tremble, Latin passage opened, agreement to march against the fort of Armenia. The brothers of the lily are the Québécois. The fleur de lis is a symbol used by a lot of French people around the world, and the Quebec flag has fleur de lis on them. The trembling mountains. Saint-Jovite is located near Mont Tremblant.
Yep.
Trembling mountain. The open Latin passage is the opening path of the Catholic Church."
Ah.
And I should say that these statements are all what Tremblay and his followers believed, not what I believe or what sort of mainstream thought on this is. Additionally, Tremblay believed that the Quebec nationalist agenda could only be realized within Catholicism.
Well, wait. Let's slow down. What happened to Great Romania?
Romania, I think that was like Rome. But they also don't talk about Armenia either.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to make sense.
Well, okay, I mean, to be fair, Nostradamus was just a terrible poet.
Yeah.
And the only reason he got any fame at all is that some rich people liked his stuff.
Yeah, so you've got a bunch of people who've made some interesting choices in their lives and are living in the woods in Quebec, interpreting the writings of a man from 600 years previously who was a little nutty and you're shocked when they come up with strange ideas and aren't good at it?
Well, they're like so many Nostradamus interpreters where they don't even like take the whole thing.
No, of course not.
They pick a couple lines that they like, but if you actually look at the whole writings of Nostradamus, it's utter nonsense.
Oh yeah, no, I read there was others and I was like, nope. There's more. There's more about the Nostradamus and I couldn't do it. I was like, no, that's enough. This will prove my
point.
point.
That's almost a whole episode in itself.
Laura's brain explodes reading Nostradamus and French people. So, like I said earlier, this is the point when I was going to talk about the FLQ and Vatican II, but we've talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
This was a really unique social and political time in Quebec. The atmosphere was very, very unique. And also just, this is the 70s. It's not even just in Quebec. This countercultural movements are in their heyday.
This is the time of the student movement.
Fringe religious movements, new religious movements.
In our church, we had something called Seminex, which was a student walkout event that went poorly for everybody involved.
Everyone lost. Yeah,
Nobody won Seminex. But yeah, this is a time where you see these sorts of movements. You see a lot of anti-war protests. You see a lot of. It's really not that different from now.
No, we're in another one of those times.
We're in another period where we're seeing a lot of student movements, a lot of walkout protests, stuff like that. So it's this is the sort of thing you need to watch out for in periods like this, where people are grifters.
When crazy people with beards and robes come to you and start talking to you about how they talked to the Virgin Mary last night. I'm not saying don't listen to them, but proceed with caution.
As I believe it says in Scripture, test the spirits.
I was just going to say, don't be a dumbass.
Yeah, this is...
That's not in the Bible.
And you know what? But we are even seeing a lot of these types of people. We're seeing like Alex Joneses, Sebastian Gorkas.
Oh, yeah.
In Canada, we even have a French guy in Canada. I can't remember his name for the life of me. But there's a French...
Stéphane Molyneux. Yep.
So this is these periods are times where grifters just kind of
absolutely
ooze out of the woodwork.
Yep. And speaking of grifters, Michel Collin.
Oh.
Nice segue. He also believed Quebec was going to be significant. He told Tremblay that at one point he saw the word Canada going out in all directions and heard, "One day the church will go out there in the distance and spread its light on every continent." I just really enjoy the idea of just the word Canada.
The word Canada.
Not like maple leaves or a sense of Canada, just Canada, Canada, Canada.
Well, maple leaf wasn't even really our symbol yet, was it?
It was, but just barely.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, it wasn't...
Beaver or something.
We didn't have a flag yet.
He wasn't drowning in maple syrup or something. We did have a flag. This is the 70s.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
It was the 60s we got the flag.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Collin wrote that all the prophecies that announced the salvation coming from France were actually referring to Quebec, as France had fallen into the same sins as the rest of Europe. But Quebec was insulated from those sins across the Atlantic, hidden amongst a butt ton of trees.
And Anglos.
There was a buffer of Anglos in the Maritimes, and then there was the Acadians who were like French, but kind of their own French, so that was a second buffer, and then you get to the French.
That's
in
right.
Quebec.
Jean Gaston.
Yep.
How many eggs do you think Jean Gaston could eat?
I don't know. My computer just died, but fortunately, this is the end of the episode. Actually.
Good. Oh, good.
So this is where we're going to leave off. There will be a second part to this episode. I am going to forewarn you that fringe Catholic movements are not exempt from sexual abuse scandals either.
No.
Well,
any cult movement.
Yeah,
it's gonna come up.
Yeah, it happens. And so
let's just keep that in mind for next episode. This is a cult. It is a destructive cult.
I will not
to the destructive part right away.
Yeah, I will not go into specifics about the abuse, but I just want you to know that it's going to be there, and I we will try to put some like timestamps in, but it's kind of like a ever-present topic, so you might not be able to skip it. You might just have to
skip the episode.
In which case, I'm sorry. I hope you have a great week, and go watch some puppies on YouTube.
Yeah, if you need a list of podcast recommendations, I can give you one of those too.
Yeah. I heard there's I haven't listened to it yet, but it's called Dog Tales. And it's just cute stories about dogs.
Oh, there you go.
That sounds good. So I don't know. But this is our very own anti-pope, Jean Gaston Tremblay.
There you go. So, folks, thank you very much for joining us here today. You can find me on Twitter talking about wrestlers and to other independent podcasters. If you follow me on Twitter, that is at Canuckonomicon. I also recommend that you check out the Podcast Junkie. I think he changed his name to Cast Junkie, all one word. Capital C, capital J. Check him out. I'll try to remember to include a link to his Discord server in my description, but I probably won't. I never do. And like we said at the top of the episode, please try and support us on Patreon and Ko-fi if you have a little extra cash floating around.
Or just be like, hey, share this episode, because, hey, there's a third person now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, please, if you have friends or family who are into Canadian history at all in any way, please send them over to my podcast. Let your friends know. Spread the word. And we'll catch you on the flip side.
Keep your eyes open.
Canuckonomicon is a production of Crossing Clay Studios. We can be found on Twitter at Canuckonomicon, and you can contact us through email at canuckonomicon@gmail.com. Please be sure to share us with your friends and family, and keep your eyes open.